Hi, my name is Julian Olsner, and today I'll be talking about weapons of mass destruction. My beloved city of Hiroshima suddenly became a desolation, with heaps of ash and rubble, skeletons and blackened corpses. It's quotes from Setsuko Thuro, a survivor from the Hiroshima bombing in 1945. My proposition states that the United States federal government should establish a foreign policy significantly limiting the use of weapons of mass destruction. My definitions are the U.S. federal government, the administration of the United States, should, ought, establish, create, foreign policy, a rule that the world must follow, significantly, meaningfully, limiting, controlling, use, act, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons in this case. Harm number one is the loss of life on this scale is not necessary, even in a time of war. The use of nuclear weapons is not humane, and the destructive capabilities far outweigh the benefits. The enormous destructive capabilities of nuclear weapons aren't needed and is the most inhumane way to kill a person. Hitting civilians and soldiers indiscriminately wreak havoc and devastation and have long-term radiation effects that affect future generations. Used twice in wartime, in 1945 on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, around 250,000 civilians were incinerated in an instant or were subjected to horrendous deaths in the weeks and months following the attacks. A temperature of several million degrees centigrade over a wide area, resulting in a heat flash, literally vaporizes all human tissue. At Hiroshima, within a radius of half a mile, the only remains of most of the people caught in the open were their shadows, burnt into stone. This does not sound like a very pleasant way to die, and there's really no moral reason to keep nuclear bombs around. The detonation of a nuclear weapon can have long-term health effects on those subjected to them, but also children and even unborn fetuses. These deficiencies can often be transmitted to people's offspring, and those who are born in a world with birth defects are attributed to nuclear bombs in that area. We need to change the idea that a country is powerful just because they have nuclear weapons. This is not correct. This does not help the idea that the country should begin stockpiling less nuclear weapons. It only adds the stigma that they should be increasing it. Harm number two, the nuclear weapons carry a huge proliferation risk. With countries stockpiling more and more nuclear weapons every year, this adds to the proliferation risk, which has countries increasing their supply. Ever since the Cold War, the nuclear superpowers of the world have been increasing their stockpile of their nuclear weapons, and mainly in the US and Russia. In political science, there's this neo-realist theory called the security dilemma, where states keep increasing their nuclear arsenal as a defense mechanism. This plays into the role of the zero-sum outcome, where the state's security increases and other states decreases. Now, in order for a state to feel safe, they have to have a balance of power. They keep increasing their weapons in a cry for self-preservation. This has gone back and forth since the 60s and really isn't healthy. The Cuban Missile Crisis is a result of this, which countries want to protect their dominance. This is only happening between two countries while the rest of the world is helpless to do anything. The fate of the world rests between the hatred of just two countries. How is that fair? This shouldn't be a problem, and with that mandated system, it can be fixed. This has a sort of impact on people that makes them think having more nuclear weapons makes a state more powerful. This isn't the type of thinking that will lead to a nuclear-free world. These weapons haven't been used against any country since 1945 and have only really been used as a deterrent. Is it really worth all this trouble for them to only act as a deterrent? This needs to change because if it does not, then countries are just going to keep stockpiling more and more nuclear weapons, and the cycle will just keep repeating itself. With legislation that will establish a foreign policy initiative to decrease the number of nuclear weapons in the world, it would no longer be a problem. The inherency is structural. The increase of nuclear weapons creates a threat to humanity through the possibility of a nuclear war. Nuclear weapons ought to be diminished in a country with nuclear power in order to keep order. History has shown us how destructive these weapons can be, and they are unnecessary in today's world to keep peace. The impact of a nuclear detonation in an urban environment could cost millions of lives, and this needs to change because the threat nuclear weapons pose vastly outweigh the benefits. The plan would be to create a foreign policy initiative that would mandate countries to decrease their nuclear arsenal. Organizations such as NATO would enact economic sanctions against countries that didn't obey their mandate. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was created in 1949 by the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations to provide a collective security against the Soviet Union. Now, in modern times, they will help devise a plan to disarm the world of all of the nuclear weapons. The agency will create a treaty amongst the world's nuclear nations, barring them from exceeding a certain number of nuclear weapons. Economic sanctions will be used to enforce those who don't comply, and this will cripple the nation's economy, forcing them to eventually join. The cooperation of global leaders will be necessary to make this work. all nations must sign the treaty and agree to decrease their nuclear arms. This plan will work because if countries don't end up following it, then economic sanctions assigned to them will cripple their economy. No country can function properly with a crippled economy, so they will be forced to agree. The impact would be a nuclear-free planet. The advantage number one would be no more inhumane deaths from nuclear bombs. No one would be subjected to a death by a nuclear bomb, and wars would be fought more humanely. Advantage number two would be the proliferation of a nuclear bomb would no longer exist because countries no longer have these bombs to stockpile, and they cannot threaten one another with them anymore. Thank you so much.